Are you a woman of faith in business who is aspiring to start a podcast, or maybe you have a podcast and you want to rebrand or relaunch your podcast? I have good news for you. Announcing and introducing She Elevates Media. She Elevates Media is a collective and a collaboration project and your marketing team to launch your podcast. We will assist you from beginning to end in launching your God-given message in the marketplace in the form of a podcast. We help you plan the podcast, we help you publish and produce the podcast, and we also help you promote the podcast. So this is something that is new to the marketplace, and I am one of the individuals as a part of the collective of your marketing team. So I encourage you to go to sheelevatesmedia.com to learn more about how we can partner with you to launch your podcast, to rebrand your podcast, or to relaunch your podcast as we walk you through the path to profiting in your podcast, where we plan, we publish, we produce, and we promote your podcast. Learn more at sheelevatesmedia.com. Welcome to the Women Faith Plus Business Podcast. I'm your host, Nadine Mullings. I'm an author, speaker, and podcast host, and I believe in the importance of women of faith stepping up, shining in their lane, and sharing their God-given message so they can have the impact, income, and influence they were born to make. Join me this season to discover how women of faith in business are using podcasts as their platform to share their mission-driven message. And be sure to join the Women Faith Plus Business community by going to NadineMullings.com/community. That's NadineMullings.com/community. See you in the powerful community of women of faith in business, and enjoy this episode of the Women Faith Plus Business Podcast. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Women Faith Plus Business Podcast. So this episode is super special for a couple of reasons. The first reason is it's a solo episode. So this entire season, I've been interviewing some amazing women of faith in business who are podcast hosts, because this entire season is about spotlighting women of faith in business who have their own podcasts, who basically have a platform and a message that they are sharing through the vehicle and the vessel of a podcast. So I have been highlighting several women this season, but this particular episode, it's me, and it's just me. It's a solo episode, and what I'm going to be sharing this episode is actually the backstory of the Women Faith Plus Business podcast. And I think this is the first time ever on the podcast that I'm going to be sharing the backstory about how Women Faith Plus Business, at least the podcast, came to existence. So I'm excited to share that story with you guys today. In addition to being a solo episode and sharing about the Women Faith Plus Business podcast, it's also my birthday. So I'm recording this ahead of time, but today it should be published on my website on June 25th. And I want to tell a little story about that whole fact that it's coming out on my website on June 25th, and June 25th is my birthday. So I want to share that God is a God of providence, right? Sometimes we think we know what's going to happen, but God already has a plan in place. So every single season, and I'm going to be sharing the logistics and the behind the scenes of how the podcast works, but every season I set up a schedule and I say, okay, episode 1 is going to drop on this date, episode 2 is going to drop on this date. And it just so happens for this season, I had to add 2 additional podcast episodes to make the graphics even out and to make the season even out. I had to add 2 additional episodes after I had already batch record all of the episodes for this season. So because I added 2 additional episodes, I had to add into the schedule 2 additional dates. And one of the episodes I had to add was myself because I decided to feature the Women Faith Plus Business podcast and share the behind the scenes story about the Women Faith Plus Business podcast. So as I was putting the schedule together for this season, and I said, okay, episode 1 is going to be on this date, episode 2 is dropping this date, episode 3 is dropping this date. It just so happens, and it was divinely timed, that my particular episode, this episode that you're watching today, is releasing and publishing on my birthday. So June 25th, Wednesday, June 25th, most episodes drop on the website on a Wednesday. So Wednesday, June 25th is this episode and also my birthday. So that is why this particular episode is a special episode. It's a solo episode. It's just me today, and I'm going to be sharing. And it's also my birthday on the published date for this episode. So because it's just me, let's go ahead and get into the content for today. So as I mentioned already, this season is all about podcasts and really using podcasts as a platform for your God-given message. As women of faith, as men of faith, as Christians in business, we have a message that God has given us to share with the world. And you can share your message in many different ways and different forms. You can share it in a book, you can share it on social media, but one of the most powerful platforms, I believe, is podcasting. Being able to share on a podcast, whether it's an audio podcast or a video podcast, but being able to share your message in the form of the spoken word, being the audio podcast or the video podcast, is a super powerful thing. And that's why I love podcasting. So before I actually launched the Women Faith Plus Business podcast, I'll tell you a little bit about my backstory with the Women Faith Plus Business podcast. I have always been an avid podcast listener, I guess, right? I think I listened to something, maybe a YouTube video or something. Someone was talking about podcasts, and I was like, this was many years ago. Maybe, let's see, we're in 2025 at the time of this taping. So maybe 10 years ago or something, I heard someone say, oh, I'm on a podcast, or I listen to podcasts. And at that time, I had no idea what podcast was. So anyways, I started finding out about podcasts, and I started listening to a lot of different podcasts that were out there. John Lee Dumas is a name that was one of the first people that I was introduced to when it comes to podcasts, but there's tons of other podcasts that I ended up listening to, and I'm going to forget all the names to mention them. But at that time, when I found out about podcasts about 10 years ago or so, I started listening. I was like intrigued, and I started listening to one person's podcast and their message, and then another person's podcast and their message, and then another person's podcast and then their message. And then I became an avid podcast listener. And the reason why I love podcasts and why I listen to podcasts is it's a really easy platform to absorb and process the information that's being shared. A lot of times people listen to podcasts when they're working out, or they're going for a walk, or if they're cleaning the house. It's a really great platform where you're able to listen and also multitask, be able to do other things. So podcasting is just a great way to learn as you listen. So I really did start to listen to a lot of podcasts. Shortly after I started listening to podcasts, God really dropped it in my spirit to start a podcast. He was like, it's a great platform, a great vehicle, a great way to spread your God-given message. So, at first I was like, sounds good. I want to do a podcast, but I'm really not sure what the podcast would be about or what I would do. So the years went by, and I didn't really take initiative to start the podcast, even though it was something God put in my heart. It was a seed that He planted. Years went by, and I did not do anything with this podcast idea. But in 2020, to be specific, September 2020, God really laid it on my heart heavy to start a podcast. And He gave me the vision of the podcast, and it was the Women Faith Plus Business podcast. I had already started the Women Faith Plus Business community with Facebook group a couple years before. And He basically placed on my heart that in addition to the community, I could create this podcast as a platform to really share the message of women of faith in business who are open about their faith, right? They're open on their platform platform. They share about their faith. They talk about God. They talk about Jesus Christ on their business platform. And to really have a podcast that showcased them, showcased, their journey, their decision as to why they decided to be open about their faith on their business platform. So God planted the seed, the idea of what the podcast needed to be about in 2020. And I do want to highlight the year 2020 because I've said this several times on the podcast that a lot of the guests that have come on the Women Faith Plus Business podcast have mentioned 2020. And I see the pattern of this year. They've either dropped books in 2020 or they had ideas in 2020 or they launched their podcast in 2020. But 2020, as we all know, was a powerful and pivotal year. A lot of things happened in the world with the pandemic. A lot of things shifted and pivoted for a lot of people in life and in business. It was a very difficult season for us to go to as a world, as people, as a generation. And it was also significant and powerful in the shifting that took place in that year. As I mentioned, so many people thought about ideas or created things or launched things in that year. So 2020 was the year that God really planted in my heart that it's time and I needed to launch the podcast. So I went ahead in September 2020 and decided to move forward with the Women Faith Plus Business podcast. So when it comes to podcasting, and several of the guests this season have shared about this, that they reached out to a mentor or a coach, or they took a course, they did something to help guide them in the process of launching their podcast. So for me, there were several individuals, I think people that I listened to on podcasts. I think I may have even purchased a course, a mini course, or maybe it was a free course on how to start your podcast. And I also reached out to my business bestie. You've seen her on several times on the Women Faith Plus Business podcast, Carol J. Dunlop. And she has hosted podcasts for years. So she has experience and expertise in the area. So when I realized okay, God is telling me to go ahead and launch Women Faith Plus Business podcast, I need to know the details, the direction, the instruction on how to launch this thing. I reached out to Carol and I said, hey, I'm about to launch this podcast. I need your help. She was like, yes, definitely. I'm here for you. And I partnered with her with launching the podcast. She is actually the behind the scenes person that helps to edit the videos and the audio. I started out with just audio, but she edits both of them for the Women Faith Plus Business podcast. And she also creates the images. So any images that I have for every single guest, we create 3 images for each guest. She creates the images and she edits and produces the audio. So I partnered with someone, and I share that with you because when you are launching anything, not just a podcast, but anything in life, you need that help. You need that direction. You need that guidance. You need that instruction. So make sure you're getting that support when it comes to launching your podcast. If you already have a podcast or if you're thinking about podcast, make sure you're partnering with someone that can help you to make the process easier. So definitely. And as I've mentioned this season, She Elevates Media is a new collective and collaborative project that I'm involved in. And that definitely is something that can help you with launching your podcast. So I'll do a quick plug for She Elevates Media. Definitely check out sheelevatesmedia.com if you want to learn more about getting help, getting assistance, getting partnership in launching your podcast. So rewind and going back to my initial podcast journey and my story, when I partnered with Carol and decided to go ahead and launch the podcast in September 2020. So this year, 2025, will be 5 years. And this season, as you know, is season 10. So it has been 5 years that I've been doing the Women Faith Plus Business podcast and 10 seasons, right? So when I partnered with Carol about, launching the podcast, one of the things that I kind of felt was a little bit overwhelming when it comes to podcasting is I didn't want to be on the hamster wheel of constant content, right? Having to churn out content every single week for my podcast. That really intimidated me. It didn't feel good in my spirit to do a podcast that way. So I really sat with the Lord and I said, Lord, what is it that you desire? How do you desire for me to do this podcast? And he dropped a spiritual download in my spirit something Carol always says, spiritual downloads. So he dropped it in my spirit to do seasons, right? And the vision and the idea that he gave me was just like a TV show. If you watch a TV show, it has a season and it has a certain amount of episodes and then it ends, right? And then hopefully it comes back for season two and then it ends. So he really dropped it in my spirit that this should be the format for the Women Faith Plus Business podcast. It really should be about a season, right? What is this season about? Who will the guests be for this season? What is the topic? What is the theme for the season? How many episodes will be in this season? And then the season ends, right? So the season ends, and then I get to take a break. I get to rest. I don't have to be on the hamster wheel of churning out content constantly. And that felt good to me. That felt good in my soul, in my spirit. I felt like I can do this. I really can do this podcast and be consistent on it because I'm going to be doing seasons. So I won't be on the constant hamster wheel of churning out content. So once God really revealed the format of the podcast to me, being seasonal and having episodes, he also revealed to me what the topic is or the mission of the podcast. Of course, it's called Women, Faith, and Business. So the goal of the podcast really is to spotlight, as I mentioned, highlight women of faith in business who are using their platform to glorify God. So they not only have an amazing business and they're doing great work in the world, but that business and that platform is also glorifying God, making sure that God's name is recognized and also honored and glorified in the marketplace. I really wanted to have conversations with these women and really get their stories. What was their journey? What was their decision as to why they decided to not just create an amazing business, but also openly and outwardly talk about God and talk about their faith and talk about religion, which sometimes can be taboo, right? Some people feel like you need to separate business and faith, that they're not supposed to be combined. I had that initial thought when I first started my business because I came from a corporate background, and in a corporate background, you don't really talk about politics or religion at work because it can be controversial, right? People have different opinions on things. So we were taught in the corporate environment not to mix the two. So initially, when I started my business, I didn't talk about my faith. I didn't talk about religion. I didn't talk about God or Jesus Christ or anything like that on my business platform. But so much was happening behind the scenes. Like I was praying, I really feel, and I've said this many times before, that entrepreneurship is a faith journey because you do not get a paycheck every 2 weeks. You are relying totally on the vision God has given you, the drive He's given you, the momentum He's given you, and relying on Him to be the provider, to be able to pay your rent or mortgage every month, to pay your bills every month, because He has given you this idea. He has given you that vision. So it really is a faith journey. So I really felt like I needed to be talking about it more on my platform, not just behind the scenes, but in front of the scenes to let everyone know how this is a faith journey and the role that God plays, not just personally, but professionally and in our lives and in our businesses. So I wanted to create this podcast to have a safe space to be able to talk about these things, to be able to have these conversations, to be able to share about these things. So God really just dropped in my spirit who I needed to reach out to. Every single season, and I still do this for every single season, I start with a blank sheet of paper and I just start writing names. God will give me the names of the individuals that I need to reach out to that need to be guests on the season. And then I just reach out to them, and most of them, are happy to be guests on the season and share their story. So not only did God give me the format of the podcast being seasonal, not only did God give me the theme and the topic of the podcast, but He also gave me the guests who I needed to reach out to. So this was really a God thing and not a Nadine thing, right? This was His idea. This is His vision. This is something that I get to steward and really birth and create in the marketplace. And my hope, my desire, my goal is always for this podcast to be some type of inspiration, some type of encouragement, some type of instruction on how you, as the listener, as the audience, can really incorporate your faith in your business and really recognize how your faith shows up in your business, that it's not two separate things, but it's actually combined. And it's actually powerful when we recognize the combination and combining of faith and business. So in 2020, I took that leap of faith and I started the Women Faith Plus Business podcast. I reached out to 10 specific women that God put on my heart to reach out to. They agreed to be guests for season one. And I launched season one. And usually each season is about 3 months. So I batch record. So when you see these episodes leaked every week, I've actually already batched record them in advance. And then I leak it out every week. And usually it's around a 12 to 14 weeks of content and conversations that I share each season. So that kind of is the format, the backstory, the idea, the fruition, and how the Women Faith Plus Business podcast started. Something else I want to share about the podcast is because it's called Women Faith Plus Business, most of the time I'm interviewing women of faith, obviously. But what I will say is every single season, when the season ends, I sit with the Lord. I sit with the Lord and I ask him, what is it that you desire for next season? Number one, do you want me to continue, right? Do you want me to continue the podcast, or is there another assignment or another thing that you desire for me to do in this season? So I think it's really good to just check in, right? Just check in with God, because sometimes we can get caught up with doing a thing and being successful at a thing and continue doing the thing, but not stop and pause and say, do you want me to still do this thing, right? So I'm very conscious and intentional at the end of every season to stop, be still, and pause and say, Lord, do you want me to continue with the Women Faith Plus Business podcast, or is it time to end after this season, right? And for the most part, I've heard continue, right? And we're in a season right now where God is dealing with me, whether it's stopping or continuing for season 11. So after this season is done, we shall see what the answer is. But for now, I feel like it is going to continue. So season 11 will be coming out. So yeah, but I still, at the end of every season, sit with the Lord and just hear a word from him. In addition to whether the podcast should continue, I also sit with the Lord about what is the topic and the theme for the next season. So as I mentioned, this is Women Faith Plus Business, but one season, God dropped on my heart to interview just men, an entire season of men of faith, and really hearing their stories and their journeys and highlighting and spotlighting and showcasing their businesses and the work that they're doing in the world. So that's why it's so important to sit and hear from the Lord, because initially when I heard that from the Lord, I was like, well, Lord, this podcast is called Women Faith Plus Business. So why is it you want me to have a season of men on the podcast? I was a little confused at first, but it was what he put on my heart to do. And it was a great season. It was really a great way to highlight various men of faith and to really see that they're on the same journey as us, right? Whether you're a woman or a man, we're all Christians, we're all believers, we're all people of faith, and a lot of our journeys are very similar, right? So to be able to have that season, I forgot what season it was, what number it was, of men of faith was really good. And it was really, I wouldn't say eye-opening, but confirming as to what we all go through as believers in business and when we're combining our faith in our business. So yeah, sometimes when you check in, God changes it up a little bit. He mixes it up and shakes it up for each different season. Another thing that he did that kind of shook up the podcast a little bit was, instead of just focusing on women of faith in business and them sharing their stories and why they decided to be, open about their faith on their business platforms, over the last couple of years, he's really focused on women of faith in business who have messages, right? So that's why you saw in season 8, that I focused on women of faith in business who were in collaborative books and what that message was for those collaborative books, because God really put it on my heart for that season to really share those women who have put their message together in a collaborative book and their stories and what the book was about. So we had a whole season 8, about collaborative books. Season 9, God put it on my heart for solo books. So women of faith in business who have published a solo book, their journey, their story, their message. So that was season 9. And as you know, for season 10, God put it on my heart for women of faith in business who are podcasters, who host podcasts and share their God-given message on podcasts. So each season, it really is a matter of sitting with the Lord to hear whether I should continue the podcast, yes or no, what the theme of the next season needs to be, and then, as I mentioned before, who the guests need to be, right? So sometimes I get people who email me and say, oh, so and so will be a great guest for your podcast. And I write the person's name down. And then if they are a right fit for that season, I will reach out to them. So I do have people that reach out to me about being guests on the podcast. But I would say the majority, maybe 90 to 95% of the guests on the podcast are spiritual downloads, just people God puts in my head and my heart to be on for that season. And then I just write their names and reach out to them and ask them to be a guest on the season. So I'm sharing all of this because this season is about women of faith in business who are podcast hosts. And as a podcast host, I wanted to share the journey and the story of the Women Faith Plus Business podcast to give you a glimpse into, how I started this particular podcast. And definitely, if you're on the fence, if you're thinking about starting a podcast, or maybe you started a podcast, but you just didn't keep the momentum up, right? And so you need to rebrand it, or maybe repurpose it, or put it out there in a different way again. I encourage you to do that because, as I mentioned before, podcasting is a powerful platform. So I encourage you to go ahead and get that out into the world. It took me several years, as I mentioned, to really decide to move forward, but God really put it on my heart in 2020. And I've been 5 years. I can't even believe it's been 5 years. In September, it will be 5 years into the podcasting journey. So I definitely encourage you to get started. Don't delay what God has put on your heart. Go ahead and get started today if God has put a podcast on your heart. And as I mentioned, I would love to partner with you. The She Elevates Media team would love to partner with you to launch your podcast, to get your podcast started. And so again, this episode is a special episode because it's just me, and it's me sharing and hopefully inspiring and encouraging you when it comes to your God-given message and being able to share it on a platform and in the form of a podcast. So thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Women Faith Plus Business Podcast. I don't even think I introduced myself, but you guys see me every episode. But in case this is the first time you're coming across the episode, I'm going to do my introduction at the end of the episode. But I am Nadine Mullings, the host of the Women Faith Plus Business Podcast, plus the founder of the Women Faith Plus Business community and the CEO of Nadine Mullings Marketing Agency. And what we do in the agency is we help women of faith in business who may be struggling to market and promote their book, their business, or their brand. So if you have a book, a business, or a brand, and you really want to reach more people, you really want to get the word out there more, this is what we do in the agency. This is how we help. But again, one of my projects right now is She Elevates Media. I'm a part of the team and part of the collective and the collaboration. And we really help women of faith who are mission driven, have a message, and are starting a movement. We help them to launch their podcast, their summit, or their book so they can get their message out there in a big way. So thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Women Faith Plus Business Podcast. Are you a woman of faith in business who is aspiring to start a podcast? Or maybe you have a podcast and you want to rebrand or relaunch your podcast? I have good news for you. Announcing and introducing She Elevates Media. She Elevates Media is a collective and a collaboration project and your marketing team to launch your podcast. We will assist you from beginning to end in launching your God-given message in the marketplace in the form of a podcast. We help you plan the podcast, we help you publish and produce the podcast, and we also help you promote the podcast. So this is something that is new to the marketplace, and I am one of the individuals as a part of the collective of your marketing team. So I encourage you to go to sheelevatesmedia.com to learn more about how we can partner with you to launch your podcast, to rebrand your podcast, or to relaunch your podcast as we walk you through the path to profiting in your podcast, where we plan, we publish, we produce, and we promote your podcast. Learn more at sheelevatesmedia.com. Thank you for listening to the Women Faith Plus Business podcast. I hope this episode has been insightful and inspiring and has offered you an opportunity to take action to transform your life and your business. Wherever you are listening, be sure to rate and review the podcast and also subscribe to get the next episode right in your inbox by going to womenfaithandbusiness.com to join our email list.